In this unit on Cherokee governance and society, we're going to come across a great deal in terms of policy and history that touches on tribes all across not only Oklahoma, but really all across the nation. And in their move towards nationalism and their opposition to removal, the Cherokee people in many ways forced the United States to clarify its positions on policy, to own up to some of its inconsistencies in policy, and confront what, quite frankly, avarice and duplicity had to do with the Cherokee removal. So as we work our way through this foundational and admittedly confusing body of law that grew out of several court cases that the Cherokees brought, we'll see that the challenges that they raised with the Supreme Court did an enormous amount to structure what it means to be Indian in today's America. And also, we'll see that that story reveals a great deal about what is yet to be resolved when it comes to the structure of the United States government as a whole.
So, this concept of Indian territory, this has been around a long time. I think that people think that that's something uniquely Oklahoma based, but this whole issue of removal has been a part of the relationship between the federal government and Native peoples for a tremendously long time.
That's absolutely right. And in fact, part of the big problem came up with the Cherokees case through Georgia's claims to land. They had an 1802 compact. So this is well before even Jackson. And that compact said that Georgia would give up some lands so that the feds could have them in exchange for the feds working to extinguish Cherokee title just as soon as they were able. So yeah, it was even on Thomas Jefferson's mind that that might be an option to start moving tribes west of the Mississippi.
Mm-hmm. So based on the readings and the videos that we'll engage in this unit of the course, one question that's got to be paramount is, there's a Cherokee Nation in North Carolina, and could you help us understand that?
Right. Not only is there one in North Carolina, there are two in Oklahoma. So we've got three federally recognized groups of Cherokee folks. And that, in essence, grows out of removal, which is where we're going to sort of lead up to and try to get a sense of what steps were involved. But in essence, what happened was after the federal government came in and rounded up all the Cherokees it could find, it nevertheless left a few straggling back in the hills of North Carolina. And with the help of some benefactors and with their own agency, they got together and worked out a way that they would be able to stay after the main body of Cherokee folks had come over in the late 1830s.
So how does that work? Is it one unit with three separate bodies, or are they all federally recognized?
All three are federally recognized, but they are each independent sovereign nations. So they operate more or less in the same way that the Cherokees and the Creeks do. They've got their own systems of government. They've got their own constituent bodies. There are a few folks, I believe, who are still kind of enrolled in both places. As long as you can trace back an ancestor who is on the original rolls, you can join up in a couple of different spots. Although, for reasons that we'll talk about later on in the course, that's increasingly less the case. We're all related, but we're of different governments.
You mentioned that the Cherokee case situation has really been foundational in the shaping of federal Indian policy.
Yeah, right.
Is that still ongoing today?
As a matter of fact, it is. So not only did the Cherokees bring suit in Cherokee Nation v. Georgia, wherein John Marshall starts to establish the groundwork for federal Indian law, because Congress was largely silent on the matter. It continues today. The Cherokee Nation, I should be more clear, continue to bring some of the most pointed challenges to the courts so far. And again, we'll talk to folks about what some of those most pressing challenges facing tribal nations today are. But for one reason or another, I don't know if we've just been cranking out lawyers for so long that we don't know how to quit. But for some reason, it seems to very oftentimes be the case that the Cherokees are the ones who are demanding of the court an answer to problems that they're facing right now.
Is it true that the Cherokee were among the first Native nations to author an independent constitution?
To the best of my knowledge, they were the first. Now, there were some tribes who had official sorts of compacts set up, like the Iroquois Confederacy. But to the best of my knowledge, the Cherokees in 1827, when they ratified their constitution, were the first to declare to the international community that now we too are a nation and we are amongst your ranks.
So that is foundational then, because today it's very common to refer to what we used to call tribes as native nations today,
Yeah.
and recognizing them as separate governmental entities. So this all started with the Cherokee.
Okay, and so where that Constitution grew out of, the sorts of needs that the Cherokee folks thought that they had to address, started in some ways as a kind of bulwark against colonial incursions, right? And even though the Constitution itself is in many ways patterned on the U.S. Constitution, it has a couple of very specific and super important distinctions. One is that land is to be held in common, right? And so that's one of the main ways that the Cherokee Nation distinguishes itself from many other nations. So even as they set up a Republican sort of government, even as they have a kind of bicameral legislature, even as they consolidate the position of chief from the former red and white chiefs into one standing entity, they nevertheless say very plainly, we are in many ways here on an equal footing.
So this is the beginning of that nation-to-nation relationship.
I think that's exactly right. And that court case, Cherokee Nation v. Georgia, shows us that a native nation is not exactly like France, say, but it is still a nation, a political unit, and a state, John Marshall even says, that is invested with certain rights that are inherent. And so this gives rise to our discussions about sovereignty that are ongoing today and that we frankly can't not talk about.
You mentioned these issues of membership, and it seems that this is a major point of discourse within the Cherokee Nation today.
Oh yeah, belonging has always been troubled ground, and one of the things that a lot of people continue to think about the Cherokees is, well, first of all, that they're related to them. We oftentimes hear about
Right.
my Cherokee great-grandmother and how full-blooded she was and things like that. But there's a prevailing idea that the Cherokees are among the most assimilated of folks, and we hear Cherokee people say this themselves. Part of the reason for that is they don't have a minimum blood quantum requirement. We've heard maybe about the Certificate of Degree of Indian Blood card, right, wherein we've got a kind of fraction of blood that details ostensibly just how Indian you are. Back in the turn of the 20th century, the Cherokees rejected that logic, which in many ways kind of grew out of a eugenics movement that was overly concerned with what blood did and what it made up of, not just your racial self, but also your personality and your behaviors and everything else. So the Cherokees somehow managed to divert that demand. So they don't have a minimum blood quantum requirement. And some people have felt like that has turned them into one of the most assimilated tribes.